My name is Grace.
I'm a homemaker.
I married my husband Scott
After
a workplace romance. Our marriage life is going
With no
smoothly,
complaints,
and we get along well every day.
I
often hear that after marriage,
many
people struggle with dealing with their
relatives.
spouses. I especially hear stories about the difficulties of dealing with sisters-in-law. But I got along very well with Scott's sister Laura, and we often went shopping and traveling. I have a sister of my own. I don't get along well with Emma.
Often thought
it would be nice if Laura was my real sister. But then one year, Laura passed away due to illness. The day I received the news of her death, I was so sad that I couldn't eat, and my tears didn't stop until the day of the funeral. And on the day of the funeral, my husband, who had gone to the funeral home
suddenly
called me. What's the matter? When I answered the phone, he was talking fast in a harsh, angry voice. Do not show up to the funeral. Run to your parents'
explain
house.
the
situation later. I arrived at my parents'
not
home,
understanding
why I couldn't go to the funeral of my sister-in-law. I had been so close.
What's the matter?
Isn't Laura's funeral today? My parents were surprised by my
With a
sudden
sad
return.
face.
I revealed what my husband had told me. We just got a call from claiming to
someone.
be Scott's relative. They were complaining that you're a terrible person. They even threatened to set our
If
house
we don't
on fire.
pay damages.
We had no idea what they were talking about.
thought
It was a scam or harassment. There might be something going on. Let's wait to hear from
Just
Scott.
then
My husband, dressed in his morning suit, rushed to our house in his car. Scott bowed deeply and said, I'm sorry for the unforgivable act committed by my relatives. It seems they haven't arrived here yet, but just in case, let's go to the police. I couldn't comprehend my husband right away. He was gasping for air, so I decided to calm him down and ask
Laura's
for details. Suicide was full of accusations against you. No way it's true. It says things like, Grace told me to die, and she was violent towards me, and it asks for revenge. The relatives who took it seriously are trying to extort you with amount of damages. This place is also because dangerous. They know where it is. Let's go to the police right now. He confessed with a pale face. I collapsed in shock by the front door, but was able to regain my composure. With my mother's support, my sister-in-law said that about me. That's impossible. I've racked my brains, have absolutely no memory of doing anything like that. My husband comforted rubbing my shoulder, saying, calm down, it's okay. It's all lies. Maybe it's my mom who dislikes you and rewrote everything. Your sister-in-law always talking about you if you were her real sister. It can't be true. But I wondered if it's really to that fabricate or alter a will. Even I, with my average knowledge understand of law, if I were to tamper with such personal documents, I'd be immediately held accountable anyway, because they've called. Those relatives may be heading here. Rushed by Scott, I left my parents' house. Arriving at the police station, I immediately submitted a recording of the abuse that had been left at my parents' house, and a video from my smartphone showing relatives becoming irate. When my mother-in-law abruptly read a suspicious will, the police said since there was no actual harm, they would increase patrols the neighborhood and wait. Learning that having consulted the police would be beneficial if anything happened in the future. I felt a little relieved, but as soon as I returned to my parents' house, happened that blew away my relief. As my husband was parking the car, there was some commotion at the front door. I saw a stranger, a middle-aged man and woman shouting, "It's your fault that my sister, whose cheek was red from being slapped, my father's beloved golf club, was squashed on the ground, and fragments of broken vases and ornaments were scattered about. Presumably, my husband's relatives had stormed while we were consulting with the police. Uncle and aunt. My wife hasn't done anything. I'm calling the police for hurting my wife's sister." As my enraged husband called the police. At his words, his uncle and flinched for a second. They seemed to realize that I was the real Grace, and that the one they had harmed was my sister. But without any signs of remorse, with the golf club in hand, using a body double. "You're a sneaky woman. How dare you bully our beloved
little Laura?
It's because of you that she
In
suffered
her illness
mentally.
progressed.
However, my
Hearing
father,
the commotion
the
from
violence towards my
and
sister,
the sounds
of things
rushed
breaking
over
and grabbed my uncle's
and
head.
shouted
at him. A phone call. And now, how dare you lay a hand on my eldest daughter? I had never seen my
who
father
normally was gentle.
looking so terrifying.
It made
me shudder. Seemed unsatisfied and argued with my father,
but
for
eventually
a while the police arrived and took them away in their car for questioning. Grace, are you okay? I was tased by all that had happened. My father's words brought me back to reality, sister, for getting you hurt because of me. I rushed to my injured sister to apologize. My dad, whose energy had vanished just as quickly as it came, was asking my mom to bring an looking crestfallen as he said, sorry I couldn't protect especially you. With your wedding coming up. He tried to ice my sister's cheek with my sister grabbed ice pack from him and cooling her cheek herself said how it's not your fault. And an introvert, but you're a decent person and got along well with my sister-in-law. Damage right. I can't sue that uncle, so I made some money. That's how my sister always cool is. As a cucumber. But maybe she's just pretending for my to be calm. I thought. Feeling grateful and seeing she stood by me after I got married, believing in me despite the false accusations, made me truly reassured. That's why I couldn't forgive my violent uncle who caused my sister pain, nor myself who had let her in the first place. That night, my husband said to me, I'll go get evidence. Stay here, let me know if anything happens. And left to go to his parents' house. I was anxious while he was gone, but apparently word got around about my uncle, aunt-in-law's unreasonable violence, the relatives, and no one came to my parents' house. Later, we arranged a meeting. My parents, my sister, my husband, and in-laws, and several relatives, including my uncle and aunt-in-law, gathered at my husband's parents' house. It was a somewhat large house. My uncle and aunt-in-law seemed to understand their positions, but they were still under the delusion that they were demanding an apology with absurd logic, like if you admit to the bullying written in the suicide off the hook, so we'd like not to file a report. Either just then, $30,000. My sister, who had been quiet, spoke up. Oh, what did you say? When my uncle-in-law glared at her with a sour face, she said, if you give me $30,000, I will give up on filing a report. I can't concentrate because on my work. So hard. Hand over $30,000 to cover everything, including the golf club and things you broke, she said nonchalantly as she operated her smartphone. My uncle's face turned bright red. He started to yell, what you're making a ridiculous claim because you got punched once. You're brazen. You sisters. In the end, he lashed at my parents saying, don't you feel pathetic as parents for raising such shameless sisters? My mother, while calm, responded resolutely. With all due respect, both sisters are adults. They are expressing their opinions as capable individuals, not as children. Isn't it only natural to respond with to rudeness? I can't imagine the fear, pain, and indignation of being suddenly punched. Anyway, isn't the suicide note more serious than what happened to me? This time, while yawning, she was seemingly uninterested in squabbling her situation. Yes, the cause of this was the possible tampering the suicide note, which led my uncle and other relatives of my husband to take outrageous action. So does that mean you did it, Mom? My husband turned to his mother, my mother-in-law, who had been fidgeting very obviously well. I'm getting senile and my memory's a bit fuzzy. She tried to gloss the situation over with a simpering tone, ignoring her. My husband spread a piece of paper. This is my sister-in-law's suicide note. My mother had her diary of the place she and I found it. She forged a fake note of lies that made it seem like my wife, sister, and she read it aloud, making them believe it. Who's the fool here? My husband said, suppressing his anger, genuinely disappointed. Mom, you wrote in your diary, wishing my sister's illness on my wife instead. I can't consider my mother anymore. With a cold gaze, my husband glared at his own mother before his eyes. My mother-in-law eventually became quiet and finally broke into tears. My father-in-law, who had quietly listening, said, It's my fault for not realizing what person my wife is. Son, you don't have to deal with this family or these relatives anymore. You go live far and happily. I'll keep eye on my wife and make sure she doesn't you guys see again. That's the least can do to make amends. My husband nodded at these words and turned his aunt and uncle, who had been silent. Please pay the $30,000. Otherwise, we'll take the evidence and really follow police report. I prefer that, but it seems that's not what you want. The aunt and uncle trembled, glaring at my sister. To give $30,000 to such a bratty girl? Yeah, I can buy a V brand bag and a C brand golf club. Set lucky me. My sister Brandon had a triumphant expression on her face. I didn't like her personality, but this time there was more happiness. My father his had golf clubs broken. My mother's face of flowers was broken, and was involved in unreasonable trouble. It seemed that she was deliberately speaking in an ungraceful manner, so the three of us feel relieved. Ignoring all my of this, mother-in-law clung to my husband's leg and cried, "You're the only one left for my me, dear son." But my husband's heart opened no up longer. To her. Then why didn't you care my about sister at her all suicide was note switched. With a fake one? Just listen to me. Enough already. How low can you go? My father-in-law thundered at his wife, who still tried on Storia. I'm done with this. Let's go, everyone. We'll talk the about money later. Goodbye, my sister. Quickly stood up, looking down on my mother-in-law. She walked past the bewildered relatives and confidently and gracefully headed towards the entrance. My parents followed and my husband took my hand and led me the house. I still remember the complicated smile on his when face. He said, "She's like that she now." She used to be normal mom. When we came home from school, she'd greet us and give us snacks. It's a little sad that we won't coming to this house anymore. A week later, I was slowly starting to regain my composure, and I decided to ask my husband about the real. Well, he said, I was actually waiting until you were smiling again and spread the out real will before me. I adore you, Grace. I had a hard time with my illness. Out of the hospital quite often. I felt that my mother's interest in me was not as strong to my brother, my father's, always apparent. But you, Grace, being a girl too, and close in age, where my true confidant, because you are my emotional support, I can keep living no matter how hard it gets. That's something. My parents a considerable fortune, so I want you and Scott to inherit all of my estate. If it goes to my mother, she would just blow through it quickly. I know my would father understand. I hope I contribute your happiness. I couldn't help but hug them. Will and cry. Go ahead and cry your heart out today. My husband as said, he put his arm on my shoulder to calm me down. From that day on, I decided to smile and live my life for my sister. Carefully say for inheritance until the day really I need it. Settled matters with my husband and an uncle for $30,000. She immediately and sent a list of the in items a letter titled a thank you note the for $30,000. It's a very like approach, but maybe that's enough to grudge the pain being punched. In earnest, as a side note, my relationship with my sister improved a little after this incident, and she started inviting me to go for meals. My mother-in-law became emotionally unstable and aged rapidly. Her paranoia got worse, and she mistook a stranger for me yelling, "It's your fault." Scott left, which led to police involvement. Though she was a first offender, her mental was taken into consideration, resulting in suspended sentence. She became widely known as a dangerous person. My father-in-law, true his promise, did not abandon and her to take care of with letting her come to our place. My husband and having cut ties his with relatives are now living a life. Looking back, it was a seriously terrifying experience. I feel sorry for my father-in-law who didn't anything know about it, but I still can't forgive my mother for trembling on her daughter's feelings. My husband and will slowly walk along this long road together for my sister-in-law who longed for